Hello and welcome to another episode of Issues and Insights. I'm Bryce Shoemate from Hardin County Government, and today I actually get to interview my boss. Very seldom do people actually get to interview the person that they work for, and I have got a great boss, and I'm proud to say that Hardin County is in great hands. And so today's guest, I want to welcome Hardin County Judge Executive Harry Berry. Judge, it's glad to have you on the show today, and enjoy having you here today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to watch you get in trouble maybe this morning.
And you know, I don't have to do much to get in trouble, do I? You know,
depends on which day.
Judge, I know that we just adopted a new budget in Hardin County. In fact, our fiscal year just started the 1st of July, so now we get to come off of our spending freeze, and our treasurer says we can start spending money, although you say not very much until...
That's right, very slowly.
Until taxes start coming in, you know. So I want to touch today on kind of the state of the county and what's going on, much like the president does on the State of the Union, but kind of let folks know because, you know, even though we try to keep people informed on by having HCEC-TV film our fiscal court, not everybody gets to come and not everybody gets to watch. So
that's correct. Well, you mentioned we started a new fiscal year for us, so that's one of our primary responsibilities is managing the resources that the good folks of Hardin County entrust us with, and a lot of that has to do with the budgeting process. And for us, that budgeting process starts in February when I start meeting with department heads, as you well know,
right.
And you all bringing your have-to-have list and your wish lists and all those types of things, and we start hammering out then what the budget's going to look like. And then at the other end, it comes to fruition when the fiscal court passes what I recommended. The state statutes require that I propose a balanced budget to them by the first day of May. And obviously we accomplished that in late April when I presented that budget. And then during the month of May, the fiscal court discusses it, discusses any changes that they might like to make to that proposal. Fortunately for us, there wasn't any changes that they deemed that needed to be made, and it was ultimately approved on the 12th of June to start for the 1st of July this year.
And I know a lot of people don't realize how much there is into that process, because even though the department heads hand it into you and you start talking to department heads, because you actually have a meeting with each department head to talk about their needs and wants and what have you. But that's not the end of it. It has to be fine-tuned, correct?
It does. There's a lot of work that goes in. As you said, we meet with each of the department heads, and then Lisa Pearman, our treasurer, and I work together of crafting that budget, trying to put all the different components together. And as you can imagine, sometimes I describe it as some of my clothes that fit a little bit too tight, is that there's got to be some give and take given between the different departments and the needs and stuff, and Lisa and I sort through that. We both have 15 or more years of experience doing this, so we're able to work through that, I wouldn't say quickly, but perhaps efficiently. In this day and age, we're able to do a lot more of it electronically with spreadsheets that populate the budget and those types of things, but it's still a challenge to be able to make all the ends meet. We're a very low-taxed county, which a lot of people are very appreciative of. But that means that we have to actually count the pennies, just not the nickels, to be able to make it all work.
I know I got tickled the first time that the first year I was there that you were working on the budget, and you said, and it's kind of fun because I've never forgotten, you said, now, I may not talk to you much these next few weeks because I'm concentrating on the budget, so don't be mad at me if I don't say anything to you or if I'm a little grumpy. And after that was over, I thought, man, that's better than living with my dad, you know, sometimes, because I grew up in a pretty strict household. I thought, this is easier than that was.
It's all relative, isn't it? So grumpy to one might not be as grumpy to the other.
Exactly, you know. And so for you all that don't know, you know, in looking at a day, Judge Berry is in his office, especially when the season is there with the budget. And I notice I'll kind of walk by his office and his head is down and looking at those numbers and going through them over and over and over again to make sure that every dollar is well spent.
And you thought I was just sleeping when my head was down.
Yeah, I didn't know whether you were nodding off or praying. I wasn't sure. So one of the things that I know that people don't realize is that not only do you work on the budget, you and the county treasurer, but then it has to go to fiscal court to actually be voted on. It's not something that you can just say, hey, here it is, everybody take it. It actually has to be voted on by magistrates, correct?
It is. It's an ordinance that has to have what we call 2 readings, so actually it's went before them twice. In our system, we also send it to our committee, the Resources Committee, which is led by Mr. King, for their review before the fiscal court even approves the second reading of it. And in between those 2 considerations by the fiscal court, it has to go to the State Department for Local Government to be approved also. Now, when they're approving it, they're approving for big picture type items, things that they know that the state government has provided us with, and making sure that we're spending it appropriately, and what they call form and content, to make sure that it's formatted correctly, that all the different numbers do add up. It's not just 1 or 2 pages, as you well know, it's 50 or 60 pages
Right.
of numbers. And they're in different departments, they're in what we call different funds. And so all that has to be checked out and approved by the commissioner for the Department of Local Government before we get to approve it the final time. So there's a lot of moving parts to getting there, unlike a city budget where the city itself just takes care of that and it doesn't go to the state government for approval.
Well, and you all have to fine tune it and make sure everything is well taken care of, because the state actually sends auditors to even look at that to make sure we're following by that budget.
Oh, they do.
correct?
We're audited every year, so that, and looking over the budget and that we followed our budget is part of that audit, that things are accounted for appropriately in there. So there's a lot of things you have to think of in advance for the spending for the entire year. And of course, there's a process to be able to amend that budget, to make some changes to it, but it is somewhat of a bureaucratic process also, so you don't want to have to do it unless you just have to.
Right, and I know Lisa Pierman, our treasurer, is just a very good steward to make sure that we're following all the rules that we're supposed to, as do you.
Yep. We complement each other well. I think we do a good job of catching each other's mistakes or short-sightedness, and sometimes.
Now, I know that you talked about, your jacket fitting too tight. I know this year it was a little bit of a strain to come up with being able to take care of all of the needs. All of the wants aren't always taken care of, but the needs, try to address those as well as we can. How do we kind of stand this year?
Well, we made it all fit. I often refer to that at our level of government, unlike some other levels, we're a have-to-have level. Virtually everything we do are have-to-have items. Providing EMS, providing animal control, providing for the people at the jail. Those are things that we're statutorily mandated to do, and we do it in a very efficient manner because of the limited resources that we have. There's a lot of good-to-have things. Some things are just nice to have, but good to have things that the county's not able to do because of being rather constrained on the funding. But one of the biggest challenges this year was what was been referred to as the pension crisis, of coming up with additional funding to be able to pay for the contributions that have to be made in the pension fund. With the changes that was made in legislation this year, it cost the county another $300,000 in the budget than what we did the year that we just finished. That's about 12% more in pension requirements. And that's a hard amount to come up with in the amount of money that we have. And it does a cause for, you have to look at your tax rates and how's that money going to be provided. When we've got a budget that's essentially the same that it was the previous year, this new budget is 1.7% more. About half of that 1.7% is the increase in pensions, that $300,000, and the other half of it is a 911, the increased spending that we're going to have there for new equipment that we're going to have to purchase to be able to keep up.
Right, because I know that our 911 system is the transmission part of it is getting antiquated and it's going to have to be replaced. But going back to the pension system, had the legislature not adjusted what they were originally had said that they were going to raise it to, it was going to hurt the county very adversely as far as county government. It was.
The original discussions was going to be a 50% increase for us, which would have been about $1.2 million for the entire fiscal year, and there's just no way that we would be able to come up with that. By the end of the last legislative session, and of course I think everybody in the public probably knows now that there was a bill passed at the very last day dealing with the pension issue. And then there was a companion bill that was to phase in for local governments the payments that would have to, the increase in those payments that would have to be made. So instead of a 50% increase, we had a 12% increase. But next year we'll have another 12% increase on top of the one we just had. And the one after that will be another 12%. So we'll eventually get to that same size increase. The thought process was that A, we couldn't stomach it all at once, and B, that perhaps you can find ways to make savings before those years come. Probably what wasn't considered in some cases is governments like ours that have already been through this numerous times. The year before, without any involvement, we had an 8% increase in our pension payments. So we've squeezed just about everywhere we can squeeze. The state's going to have to figure out perhaps a different way that they can make up for the errors of the past in the funding of that system.
Exactly, and I know that we very proudly state that we are the lowest tax rate county in the state of Kentucky, correct?
We are, and we still are, even with the modest tax increase we had last year on property tax. We still are the lowest county-wide tax county in the Commonwealth, and that's something that's good for the citizens to know that none of us like paying taxes.
Sure.
And we certainly don't want to pay more than we have to. And we certainly believe, many of us do, collectively, we're probably paying too much tax. But unfortunately, folks that are in my job or the magistrate's job, we only control one small little part of all those taxes. And ours is used quite efficiently. We've made the joke several times that perhaps we could make a little bit more money as consultants to the state or the federal government and teaching them how to manage their funds.
Right, and I know many of us wear several hats, and that's one way that we're able to keep it so low, you know.
It is.
To do that. You've made a statement several times that the county employees do quite a bit with the dollars that we have to spend.
They do. We're very blessed in our county. We are, those of us that work there that are in leadership positions, but certainly the citizens of Hardin County are very blessed to have the people that work in county government doing what they're doing. They do it because they have an interest in serving their community and serving in our local government. They certainly don't do it for the pay because we're one of the lowest paid governments across the state as well. A lot of people don't realize that. They would think as prosperous as Hardin County is, but because we keep our rates so low that folks could actually go to work someplace else and make quite a bit more money.
And that's one thing that we actually worry about, Judge, especially when we talk about our EMS personnel, because of the paramedics pay so much more in other places that it makes it hard sometimes to compete.
It does. It causes a lot of turnover, and of course that causes training issues and that type of thing with the people, particularly on the lower end of our pay scales. Like you said, those that are in EMS, also at the sheriff's office and in the county jail as well. The turnover rate makes it quite a challenge, but you can only do what you can afford to do.
Sure, and I know we've talked about this in the past, and a lot of people that are watching our show may not know this, but other counties have abilities from many years ago that were voted on to be able to generate more funds. You might talk a little bit about
Sure.
that.
It's called an occupational tax, and most people that work are familiar with it because most likely in their city they're having an occupational tax and pay that. And of course that's an income tax. It's based on how much you make, but it's called an occupational tax at the local level. Many of the cities have it. Most counties have an occupational tax, but there was legislation that was done in the mid-'80s, 1986, that reformed that system. And counties that already had an occupational tax, which Hardin County did not, was grandfathered in. So they continued to collect and charge the same percentage rate that they were at the time. For counties that's 30,000 or more in population, those new rules were that if you instituted an occupational tax after that date, it had to be offset with the cities, meaning that if you paid 1% at the city and the county had a 1% rate, it would cancel out the counties. The city would get theirs, but the county couldn't collect. If it was less, the county obviously could collect the difference. Well, virtually every city that has an occupational tax has 1% or more. They're not
Right.
They're not going to go low. So out of 120 counties, there's 35 of them that are over the 30,000 population limit. Now, why that rule was 30,000, I have no idea, but it was picked out for some reason apparently. Out of those 35 counties, 7 of us are blocked out of having an effective occupational tax, because when you think about it, virtually all the jobs are in the incorporated areas in the cities of Hardin County. There's very few jobs other than maybe some ma and pa type businesses that's out in the rural part of the county. So with all those having 1% or more, Hardin County's canceled out of being able to collect an occupational tax. Now in comparison, Boone County has tens of millions of dollars a year in occupational tax alone, in addition to their property tax. Davis County has something like $4 million a year that they take in occupational tax. Warren County's not far behind that, where we're taking in zero. The city of Elizabethtown collects about $16 million a year in occupational tax, and I think Radcliffe's is $3 million. Again, Hardin County has none of those funds available to them. So that's why you don't see county parks and county recreation, is because that falls back into that category that I said of good to have items.
Right.
Not even just nice to have, but good to have items. All we can afford is to have items. So we're focused back on those services that we provide countywide, the same to city residents as rural residents. And that's EMS, animal control, sheriff coverage, and obviously operation of the jail, which the cities have no involvement in.
And it keeps us from being competitive.
It does. What makes it hard for us to be at the table recruiting new businesses, helping, because we don't have anything to incentivize it with. A lot of the incentives that cities provide is rebates on those occupational taxes. They also are able to use those occupational taxes to create more infrastructure to make it more attractive. Quality of life type services, all those types of things. So while our cities do a good job of that on our behalf, it makes it hard for the county to actively participate in those type things.
What would it take? How would Hardin County be able to overcome that? In other words, how would they ever be able to get an occupational tax? If would it take the legislature to pass that, or what?
It would, Rice. That's the only solution for us now at this point or juncture, is that it would require a legislative change to remove that 30,000 limit as far as the population for those rules. Right now, a county that's under 30,000 is treated the same as a city. So their occupational tax isn't offset with the city. They're not restricted to just a 1% level like the counties over 30,000 is. So if those requirements were removed, that would give us equal footing with counties of our size that already have an occupational tax, and not being a little harsh about it, punish us for decisions that were made in the 70s or 80s that now we can't change unless the legislation changes.
And the only way that we can raise it is by raising property tax, but then again, you're only allowed to raise it so much without having a referendum, correct?
Correct. The 4% cap on raising the property taxes, that's not a 4% raise, it's the revenue can't grow by more than 4%. That's about $300,000 a year at the county level. It would take a long time to even get to a $5 million point of more revenue to be able to do some of these things with. So we're not necessarily advocating for a tax increase. What we're advocating is that Hardin County should be treated the same as Warren County or Boone County or Davis County. And at this point, we're not. Because
of the way they changed the law, it almost makes it unfair for us.
It does, exactly.
And keeps us from being, like I keep saying, competitive. One of our buddies keeps using the word burden. I'm using competitive today, but it is true, though.
It is. It is. It makes it a challenge.
And, you know, Judge, I kind of go back to this. When we looked at the legislature raising the pension fund so much that there was no way to raise property taxes enough to pay for that, we were going to lose county services.
We were. There would be no way to make up that $1.2 million. We would have had to reduce EMS coverage. It's hard to reduce at the jail because it's statutorily required. We would be sued over that. But we would have had to reduce coverage in 911, which means calls would get dropped or wouldn't get handled as fast. Not trying to create the sky is falling attitude, but we are that slim. There's not much left to cut. Animal control, it's a vital service. It's not perhaps the level of 911 as far as response, the quickness of it, but people still expect response when there's a vicious dog in their area, their neighborhood, and being able to take care of those animals when they're taken in. So we run on a razor's edge as far as the funding that we have, and that would have been a dramatic hit for us.
And it's all services that people in the county take for granted that we get, that don't realize how blessed we are to have what we have. and then to lose that would have hurt.
It is.
It would have cost lives.
Another example, the fees that the sheriff's office collects to be able to operate the sheriff's office, to provide for court security at the Justice Center, to be able to have people to collect the taxes, and then be able to have folks that go out law enforcement wise out into the community. Their fees don't cover their expenses. The county government itself supplements the sheriff's office by about 1/3 of their budget, about $1.3 million. So that's another area that perhaps would have had to see reductions had the full amount of that pension crisis hit us.
Right. And again, things that people don't realize until you start talking about it here, that they don't understand, and I don't want to say that they don't understand, but it just may be things that people did not realize how close it was coming to being in that kind of dilemma.
Frightening, actually, yeah.
Absolutely. You know, talking about things that are going on, we've got all kinds of great things. We talked about some of the bad things that have happened, but we've got a lot of great things that are going on in county government. Can you touch on some of those?
Well, sure. The animal control, I just mentioned, there's a lot of good programs going on with the animal control. During the summer, they have a reading program where kids come from the library and are able to read to the animals, and that is twofold. It helps the children with their reading skills, but it also helps calm those animals and helps those animals learn how to interact in a kind of a quiet way with people, and makes maybe the dogs and the cats as well a little bit more adoptable when folks come in to see them, that they're not as hyper, as anxious as they might have been had they not had those kind of programs. Mike McNutt, who leads that department now, has done a great job with some innovative programs for spay and neuter possibilities to be able to take care of our pet cat problem, to be able to get cats back out in the population that aren't going to keep increasing that population. They've done some great programs in trying to get dogs promoted and out in to be adopted to make things a lot smoother there. We've got good things, as you know, going on in 911.
Oh, absolutely.
With the way that we changed our fee structure to be able to collect more equitably from everybody. There were people before that weren't paying for 911 very much because they were using totally cell phones and not having any landlines. And of course, years ago, the system was devised to pay for 911 based on landline usage.
Sure.
So the most equitable way to change that was to move that fee from being on your phone bill to being on your tax bill now, because everybody has a property tax bill. So now some people before were paying and some weren't paying. Now everybody will be paying, and what 911 is able to accomplish with that equality now is having enough funds to be able to update what you mentioned earlier, is our communication system to be able to reach out through all of the county, to be able to dispatch people appropriately, to be able to hear back from them, to keep them in a safe mode, those emergency services people, while they're out there. And that's quite an expensive proposition to do, costing, we're estimating somewhere, as you know, around $2 million. So to be able to fund that, this new system is going to be able to do that and help us also retain and recruit quality people to be able, as we have, to operate our 911 system.
And not too many people know that in Hardin County, we dispatch for every single county fire department, even though Elizabethtown and the city of Radcliffe have their own dispatch agencies and have paid fire departments. Hardin County government still dispatches for them free of charge.
For the fire departments, yes, and for, like you said, for the sheriff's office and for all the volunteer fire departments as well. It's quite a busy operation.
Absolutely. With 14 fire departments, the sheriff's office going all the time, and a lot of people won't believe this, but EMS is our biggest call volume of anything that we have at Hardin County 911.
It is. Something like 2/3 of the calls go to EMS.
So you all are calling our folks a lot, so we're glad to serve you, but we just want you all to also know that this pension burden actually hurts some of our call. You know, if that keeps on, it's going to hurt our ability to be able to respond in a timely manner.
Exactly. We want to make sure we answer that call when the phone rings, that you're not on hold or you have to call back.
Absolutely.
That would be a tragedy.
Absolutely. And we do have a new person at Hardin County EMS, since we're talking about them.
We do.
Jamie Armstrong.
We do. He's doing a great job. He's been there about a year. He's done a fabulous job with managing their resources and getting expenditures down and revenue up, and those are both the right direction for both of those items. in addition to his leadership and the camaraderie that the team has now, and he's just doing a fabulous job for us.
And just recently have a new road supervisor as well.
We do. We can't say enough good things about Dwight Morgan, former magistrate, that we now have leading our road department. That's a challenging department, a lot of work to do. Obviously out this time of year in the heat is a challenge as well, but the biggest challenge, as we've been talking about before, is our resources constraints. But Dwight knows the road business quite well from the other end, of the funding end, of being our lead person at fiscal court. In fact, he's been very active statewide at legislative committee meetings, testifying to the legislature on the needs for county governments, their road issues, their funding issues. So he's very knowledgeable about where the money comes from, how to increase those funds from the state through special programs, grants, those types of things, and working hard at trying to take our road department to the next level.
And that's a great segue into, when we talk about road funding, you know, we've been hurt a little bit by the road funding because of the way that has gone about in the last few years, correct?
We have, and I'll be happy to tell you now, you moved us back to bad news though, from the good news, but that's okay. We want people to understand that our road funds are challenged, that across the state in 2015 when the legislature decided to let the gasoline tax recede, go back to being a lower rate, which a lot of people think right off the top of their head is, oh yeah, less tax, that's good. But that's the only way that the state road fund and county and city road funds get money, is through that motor fuels tax, which is called the gas tax. When it receded or went down in 2015, that cost the state's road fund about $200 million. And of course that trickles down to us because about 40% of the road fund goes to state or to local governments, county and city governments. That caused almost a $600,000 a year, not just in 2015, but 16, 17, now 18, $600,000 a year less for us in road funding. That's a significant hit when the road department's entire budget was $3.6 million, and now it's $3 million. That's a dramatic cut. And you figure a lot of those costs are fixed costs, electricity, payroll, all those types of things. That's a dramatic cut to the amount of material that you can actually put out on the roads now.
Right. Well, we've got great employees, and we want to brag on them.
We do.
With the county. And, you know, Judge, we talked about this earlier. Our time would go by fairly quick. In 30 minutes, it's gone by just like that.
Has it already?
Absolutely. But we do want to thank our employees that
We do.
Work with us every day.
We do. We appreciate the great job they do, and we appreciate their stewardship of the limited resources we're able to provide them.
Absolutely. And Judge, thank you for all you do for our county, because I know that you're very diligent, and there are hours after some of us leave, and there on days when none of the rest of us are there. And so thank you for all your service.
It's a pleasure to have the opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us here on today's show. And thank you for joining us here on Issues and Insights, where we try to keep you informed on what's going on in this great big area that we call Hardin County. Stay tuned. We'll keep you up to date on what's going on. Continue to enjoy the summertime. And remember, folks, we try to keep you informed on what's going on in your students' life in the Hardin County school system. I'm Bryce Shoemate from Hardin County Government, and we want to thank the Hardin County school system for providing HCEC-TV to keep you informed.